You sit wondering why your pain lingers while others seem untouched. You absorb a room's charge before saying a word. You feel intensely, excessively. And when people call you kind, it lands as reward and reprimand at once. You've heard that your empathy is your gift, yet it often functions like a quiet ailment, a delicate sacrifice of your spirit upon other people's needs. Consider this, perhaps. Your empathy is less a holy bestowal and more a mark etched by what you've endured. Have you always viewed your empathy as a gift? Or has it sometimes felt more like a burden? Comment 1 if you felt empowered by your empathy. Comment 2 if it has ever felt like a quiet weight you had to carry. The empath, as we commonly say today, is not a being perched above ordinary humanity. Rather, the empath is a strategist of survival, a psyche tempered in flames. Most poignantly, this person is often the child who was forbidden to be selfish, denied boundaries, disallowed needs, and deprived of a stable sense of self. Let us enter the symbolic darkness of your inner world. In those first years, you mastered a single, brutal lesson. You were safest only when you managed other people's feelings. Maybe your mother's constant tears soaked your infancy like unending rain. Or your father's temper thundered so fiercely that you learned to forecast his weather before he spoke. In any case, your body became a danger detector, a sensitive instrument for reading others' internal quakes. This is not compassion. It is survival. A child becomes an empath not by mystical awakening, but by a famine of emotional nourishment. Rather than pleading for care, food, attention, affection which might have branded them selfish, they learned to live on invisibility. Disappearing was the price of survival. Boundaries melted like salt into water. They morphed into whatever was required because the alternative felt perilous. You believe you love excessively, yet the reality is, you were never taught a version of love that included your own place within it. This is why I insist the empath is the child forbidden to be selfish, because genuine, healthy selfishness is not a moral failing. It is the statement, I am here. I count. I am more than a surface for other people's projections. In a culture that worships usefulness, virtue, and output, the empath becomes a saint behind bars. No feels impossible. Leaving feels dangerous. They absorb others' emotions because once doing so kept them alive. What passes as empathy is often hypervigilance. What we praise as intuition is frequently a trauma-scripted tactic for staying safe. Do you relate to this idea that what looks like empathy may actually be survival? Comment 1 if you've discovered that your empathy grew from childhood coping. Comment 2 if it's always felt like a natural gift, without deeper roots. Let us go back to the unconscious. In the fog, there is a dream, a child in a wood of eyes. Each tree watches, every shrub murmurs. The child tiptoes barefoot, quiet, because noise invites reprisal. The heart pounds, the mouth stays shut. The child carries a lantern meant for everyone else, offering guidance, light and warmth, yet has no guide. That child is your archetype. The forest is your family. The silence marks your injury. In analytical psychology, recurrent feelings function like myths your soul retells. The empath's myth is sacrifice, the mothering archetype, shackled by emotion. Yet sacrifice without rebirth is not sacred. It is merely a prolonged dying. Now picture the dream shifting. The child sits. The lantern is extinguished. Eyes closed. For the first time, they are unavailable. The watching eyes flutter in disbelief. The whispers swell. Why won't you help? Why won't you hold our pain? The child remains unmoving, tuned to their own heartbeat. That moment marks the self's emergence. Understand, That the self, the core image of wholeness, does not arise from empathic fusion, but from differentiation. To move toward wholeness, you must cease absorbing. You must practice selfishness, not petty egoism, but the sacred claim, "I deserve to live." You count emotional attunement to others as strength. The deeper strength is sensing your own feelings and refusing to apologize for them. Deeper still, your shadow waits the parts enlisted for survival. For empaths, that shadow holds rage, desire, entitlement, and ego qualities. You were told, proved you were bad. Yet without them, wholeness is impossible. An empath who disowns the shadow becomes a disguised servant, a saint hooked on martyrdom, someone who mistakes emotional servitude for sacred service. Healing starts not by intensifying feeling, but by transforming it, by no longer recoiling from your anger, no longer suppressing your needs, no longer apologizing for refusing to shoulder someone else's disorder, and by recognizing that boundaries are not battles. They are consecrated thresholds. Many empaths gravitate toward helping roles therapists, spiritual mentors, nurses, counselors. Yet, without mending their core wound, the prohibited selfishness, they begin to feed on their own benevolence. They give to validate their worth. They treat others to sidestep treating themselves. Their light becomes conditional, their compassion a childhood bargain. If I repair you, perhaps I will be protected. But the aim of individuation is not safety, it is wholeness. To be whole, you must retrieve the aspects that once alarmed others: the insistent child, the furious child, the self-interested child. That child was not wrong, only muted. You were not designed to absorb. You were designed to exist as a soul. The dream reappears. Now the child bears a mirror rather than a lantern. When others gaze into it, they see not their suffering, but a boundary, a demarcation, a decision. The empath transforms from healer to truth-teller. Some will resent this and accuse you of changing, of being cold or selfish. Paradoxically, those reactions signal that your healing is underway. The culmination of the empath's path is not sainthood, but sovereignty. Your purpose is not to soak up the world, but to reshape it. And that demands clarity about where you start and others end. Even Christ wept alone, asking for relief. Even the Buddha departed the palace in solitude. Even the divine embraced individuation. Why would your path be exempt? You cannot serve meaningfully while captive to others' emotions. You cannot carry anything if you are leaking, and you cannot love authentically until you accept the risk of being disliked for living your truth. Now you can see the empath is not ruined, yet not complete. They stand between injury and insight, between history and possibility. And the bridge is what we might call conscious selfishness. That is the doorway to healing. It is time to come back to your own soul, not as a caretaker or a savior, but simply as yourself. Many of you ask me, why do I draw wounded people? Why do my relationships exhaust me? Why do I feel accountable for everyone's healing, while no one tends to mine? I respond without pity, but with recognition. What you call love often reenacts a sacred trauma. As an empath, you are not merely pursuing connection. You are chasing redemption. You are attempting to revise the first betrayal the moment you learned your needs were excessive. Your joy, excessive; your sorrow, unwelcome. You carry the belief that if you love and mend others sufficiently, you will at last be loved not for what you provide, but for who you are. Yet this is an illusion, and illusions haunt the unconscious, like specters, replaying through each partner friend in crisis. In dream work with empaths, Certain motifs recur: an empty house they cannot exit, a weeping child sealed in the attic, a mirror that does not reflect. These are not random. They symbolize a psyche split apart. The empty house represents the hollow self, left by childhood abandonment. The crying child embodies the inner one trained, that silence ensured safety. The blank mirror signifies an ego lacking identity, molded solely by others' eyes. You inhabit these dreams even in daylight. You have constructed dwellings inside other people, but not within yourself. You know everyone else's pain by heart, yet you have lost the contours of your own soul. And now you are depleted not from weakness, but because you are ready to stop staging compassion and start cultivating wholeness. Hear this clearly. It is not virtuous to bleed for those who would not dress your wounds. It is not spiritual to erase yourself under the banner of love. It is not holy to bear loads that are not yours. That is not compassion. That is self-abandonment disguised as something holy. If your inner child was never permitted to be selfish, then as an adult, your task is to become unapologetically whole. Reclaim what was condemned, because that selfishness was never egotism. It was the soul declaring, I am here. I exist. I matter. You are permitted to refuse to step away, to feel anger, to be unwell, and to love yourself even when others are in pain. And yes, you are allowed to choose yourself. Do not mistake shadow work for self-negation. Integrating the shadow does not mean destroying the ego. It means bringing into light the parts buried under shame. The ruler's shadow is heavy with guilt, guilt for refusing, for resting, for needing, for leaving. Yet this guilt is only a specter, the echo of an old bargain. If you are good, you will be loved. But what is goodness if it costs you yourself? What is love if it demands you vanish? Empathy without boundaries is not healing. It is repetition, the soul reenacting its captivity and calling it virtue. You are not here to repeat. You are here to awaken. When the authentic self emerges, it does not roar, it whispers. Its earliest statements can frighten the unhealed parts of you. I don't want to help them anymore. I don't care what they think. I need space. I deserve joy. These are not arrogant declarations. They are the first breaths of a soul reclaiming its own belonging. You have confused kindness with self-sacrifice, yet genuine kindness includes yourself. You have confused empathy with taking on others' burdens, but real empathy has a boundary, a sacred edge that says, this is me, that is you. Burnout is not your failure. It signals awakening, showing that former patterns can no longer sustain you. The old form must pass so the true self can live. Myth teaches that transformation demands descent. In the story of Inanna, she travels to the underworld and is stripped of every title and power, standing naked before her sister Ereshkigal, the dark goddess of the unconscious. Through that symbolic death, she is reborn, whole and unafraid. You too must encounter the inner dark goddess. The keeper of your anger needs pain and exiled selfishness. The good one must die, the helper, the fixer, the smiling self who endures. Only then can the authentic self arise, the one who feels with others rather than for them, who can hold space without dissolving, and who can say, I love you, but I will not carry your pain anymore. Indeed, the empath is the former child, forbidden to be selfish. Yet that child remains within, awaiting permission to stop performing, to speak boldly, to occupy space, to refuse, without justifying, to rest without shame, and to receive without fear. Imagine no longer absorbing others' emotions, no longer serving as caretaker, no longer existing as background music in someone else's story. The ego initially resists and murmurs, "You'll be alone. They'll leave you. You'll become like the ones who hurt you." Yet this voice is not truth. It is trauma speaking. Those who made your needs feel unsafe were not truly selfish. They were unconscious. You, however, are becoming conscious, and that alters everything because awareness brings choice, and choice seeds freedom. Now a decision is required: persist in the myth of martyrdom or author a new narrative. In that new narrative, you do not heal others to earn love. You love yourself and thereby offer the world your truth rather than your servitude. You stop contracting to preserve others' comfort. You grow to meet your soul. You cease being a candle that burns out for others and become like the radiant sun whole. Those who cannot bear your light can seek their own source of illumination. Your purpose is not to regulate the unhealed, to serve as every partner's therapist, or to hold everyone else's disorder. You are here to become yourself, and that, dear empath, is the most sacred work. There is holiness in the instant you cease apologizing for existing. It is not loud or defiant. It is quiet, like a lock turning within your very bones. You have lingered too long at the edge of others' needs, refusing to swim in your own depths. But the tide is changing. The empath is awakening not into greater giving, but into self-reclamation. This moment is sacred. What seems like kindness unraveling is not collapse. It is a return, a remembering of the parts you abandoned to be loved. Can you feel it? The long-lasting ache is not defect, but signal your buried self murmuring behind the carefully arranged smile. If you are truly brave, you will stop fixing others and begin the more daunting journey of seeing yourself. You have hidden behind their wounds long enough. Now it is time to name your own. What occurs when an empath sees in the mirror not a healer, but a person urgently needing healing? That terror is also the key. Many have perfected being caretakers, listeners and guides, yet within sits a child in the dark with bandaged hands, holding others' broken pieces so tightly her own skin has torn. No one asked how she felt. She was praised only for soothing others. Thus she survived by abandoning herself. You do not have to keep playing this part. You are not here to be a saint. You are here to be whole. And wholeness may require disappointing those you once existed to please. Hear the faint stirring. That is your authenticity seeking air. Go deeper within your shadow lies a locked chest, guarded all your life. Inside are the emotions you were forbidden: hunger, desire, resentment, arrogance, selfishness, each banished by the inner judge and branded dangerous. Here is the paradox. Until you integrate the exiled, you remain split, a healer with an unhealed wound, a giver who secretly resents giving a lover who never feels loved. You cannot transcend what you will not touch. You must open that chest and do it without shame. Your anger is not wicked. It is sacred fire that clarifies your boundaries. Your selfishness is not a sin. It is the compass that guides you back to your needs. Your arrogance is not decay. It is the memory of knowing you mattered, vital for becoming whole. Invite these shadowed parts into your inner sanctuary, not to dominate, but to be seen, heard, and understood. Until then, empathy will clash with exhaustion. Your light will waver beneath unspoken resentment, and your compassion will carry a hidden plea. Please love me back. Yet love that must be earned is not love. It is debt. And you were never meant to live indebted emotionally. By individuation, I do not mean perfectionism. I mean the sacred homecoming, the gathering of your lost pieces, even those that appear selfish, unattractive, or inconvenient. Genuine spiritual maturity is not quantified by output, but by intimacy with your boundaries. How often you say no, how seldom you betray yourself, and how fully you can remain with your own presence without dissolving into another's crisis. An empath who avoids healing becomes a beacon for chaos, drawing the emotionally unavailable narcissistic and wounded. An empath who avoids healing becomes a beacon for chaos, drawing the emotionally unavailable narcissistic and wounded. This is not because you deserve pain, but because you are repeating the initial pattern unconsciously, trying to complete a childhood sentence. If I can just fix them, maybe I'll finally be enough. This is a trap. You cannot heal those who profit from your self-erasure. You cannot fix those whose love is conditional. You cannot correct the past by sacrificing yourself in the present. You must release not with bitterness, but with dignity, the illusion that empathy equals sacrifice, the myth that love requires suffering, and the lie that your worth is measured by how much pain you bear for others. When an empath ultimately chooses self, everything changes. You start drawing in people who are whole rather than needy. Silence brings peace instead of panic. You ask what you need, and you provide it without apology. This is not the feared selfishness you were taught to avoid. It is sacred selfhood. The child once forbidden to be selfish becomes an adult who is unapologetically whole. That more than service heals the world, because wholeness spreads, summoning others to integrity, inviting clarity, ending manipulation, replacing guilt with truth, and shattering the ancestral spell that equates goodness with disappearance. Dear soul, you are not meant to vanish. You are here to occupy space, not to dominate, but to radiate. Live so that your presence itself models self-respect, not by preaching fixing or saving, but by embodying an authenticity that resists manipulation. Become the person who no longer rescues, but invites others to meet you in truth, who invites partnership, not domination, and calls them to own their healing. If they cannot, you offer blessing and walk away, not from indifference, but from genuine care for yourself. You care enough to stop shrinking, to stop pretending, and to stop sacrificing your soul as a bandage. In that moment, you cease to be the child, awaiting recognition, and become the adult who has returned home to themselves. But homecoming is never a single act. It is a ritual. In Jungian terms, this return to self is not merely psychological, it is archetypal. You are not just healing your personal history, you are altering the ancestral blueprint that taught generations to mistake self-abandonment for virtue. Individuation is not isolation, it is integration. It is the soul's pilgrimage from fragmentation to coherence. When you, the empath, declare, "I will no longer betray myself," that statement echoes into the collective unconscious. You are not just liberating yourself. You are offering a new myth for those who follow. A myth where love is not earned by vanishing, where kindness does not mean collapse, where empathy no longer feeds on self-erasure. And this, Jung would say, is the sacred task of the self, to break the inherited spell and embody new wholeness. When the empath chooses self, they do not become selfish, they become symbolic. They become the vessel through which the culture begins to rethink care, rethink love, rethink power. You no longer carry your family's unlived lives. You carry the torch of transformation. Imagine the child once silenced, now speaks not in defense, but as invocation. The empath no longer hides in helpfulness, but steps into personhood, real-rooted radiant. This is not an endpoint. It is initiation. And initiation always includes death of illusion, of old roles of borrowed dreams. So let yourself grieve not just the relationships that could not hold your truth, but the identity you once needed to survive. Mourn the mask, bless the shadow, and walk forward not to escape the past, but to carry its wisdom into new form. This is the deep work, not louder, giving, but quieter reclamation. Not selflessness, but soulful integrity. You become a living symbol of what Jung called the individuated being, a person no longer trapped in opposition, self versus other, but guided by inner alignment. The journey ends where it began in the forest, where the eyes no longer haunt, and the child no longer flinches. But now, you walk upright, not because the forest changed, but because you did. Are you ready to reclaim the parts of yourself you once silenced? Comment 1. If you feel ready to walk into your next chapter with authenticity. Comment 2. If you're still gathering the strength to leave behind old roles.